When you spend 52 years with someone, you don't just lose a spouse when they pass away. You lose your best friend, your confidant, your anchor. My wife, Margaret, wasn't just my partner. She was the heartbeat of our family. The day of her funeral was the hardest day of my life. We had the service at St. Mary's Church, the same church where we'd been married as two foolish kids who thought we knew everything about love. I remember standing there, looking at her photograph framed in roses and thinking, this isn't how it's supposed to end. Family poured in from across the country. Old neighbors, cousins I hadn't seen in decades, even Margaret's childhood. Friends who could barely walk anymore. They all came. The pews were full, but one seat, one very important seat, was empty. Michael's seat. My son. My only boy. He wasn't there. And let me tell you, when the entire congregation notices the missing son, the whispers start fast. Where's Michael? Didn't he fly in? Was there some kind of family fight? I heard it all, even though they thought they were whispering quietly. Grace, my daughter, leaned in and squeezed my hand. She whispered, "Dad, don't look for him. He made his choice." But I couldn't help it. I scanned the doors, hoping he'd rush in late, tie crooked, hair messed, full of apologies. That's the kind of son I believed I raised. The one who would never abandon his mother at her final goodbye. But the doors stayed shut. When it came time for me to stand at the podium, my knees nearly buckled. My daughter slipped her arm through mine and steadied me. I looked out at the sea of faces, all there to honor Margaret. And then my eyes landed again on that empty seat. I spoke anyway. My voice cracked as I said, Margaret was the kind of woman who gave more than she ever took. She raised 2 children, Grace, who never left her side, and Michael, who I stopped. My throat burned. I couldn't finish. Grace squeezed my hand tighter, silently urging me not to break. So I swallowed the hurt and said instead, she loved her family more than anything. And I hope we honor her by living the kind of love she lived every day. When the pallbearers lowered her coffin into the ground, I felt something tear inside me. I wanted Michael's hand on my shoulder. I wanted my son to stand next to me, as a man, as a son, as the child she carried for 9 months and adored for a lifetime. Instead, it was Grace, tears streaming down her face, whispering, "It's okay, Dad. We'll get through this," and I believed her. But deep inside, a new kind of grief was born, because I hadn't just buried my wife that day. I felt like I buried the bond with my son, too. At the reception afterward, people gathered around casseroles and coffee, doing what people always do at funerals, eating, telling stories, trying to laugh through the tears. But even there, the whispers about Michael didn't stop. My brother-in-law pulled me aside. His voice was low, sharp. "Your son couldn't even show up. Lord, that's shameful." I clenched my jaw. "Don't speak of it. Today is for her, not for him." He looked at me with pity, but also something harsher, judgment. And that stung almost as much as Michael's absence. When the night ended and the guests went home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses down on your chest like a weight. I sat alone in the living room, staring at Margaret's empty chair. And I thought, what kind of man skips his own mother's funeral? But before I could even attempt to answer that question, the next day came, and with it, my son. Not with flowers, not with tears, not even with an apology, but with an urgent request. The morning after Margaret's funeral, I woke up with eyes swollen from a night without sleep. I had sat in her chair until dawn, staring at the walls as if she'd suddenly stepped back into the room. The house was too still. No clinking of dishes from the kitchen. No hum of her favorite old radio station. No gentle nagging reminding me to take my pills. Just silence. A silence that gnawed at my bones. Then came a knock at the door. For a fleeting moment, I thought it might be a neighbor, or Grace coming to check on me. But when I opened the door, there he was, Michael, my son. He stood there, tall, well-dressed, a bit too casual for someone who had missed his own mother's funeral. Not an ounce of grief in his posture. His shirt was crisp, his watch gleaming, hair slicked back like he had just come from brunch. I froze in the doorway, Part of me wanted to slam it in his face. Another part, the father in me, still hoped he'd come to apologize. "Dad," he said, tone light, almost breezy. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside silently. He strolled into the living room, glancing around like he hadn't just abandoned his mother's final goodbye less than 24 hours earlier. He sat in her chair, the very one I had spent the night in, and I swear my chest burned with fury, but I kept quiet. I wanted to hear what he had to say. He cleared his throat. "Listen, I'm sorry I couldn't make it yesterday. You know how it is. Sarah's birthday fell on the same day, and I just couldn't leave her hanging. You understand, right?" I stared at him. I wanted to scream, to tell him that no birthday party on earth mattered more than his mother's funeral. But my lips pressed into a thin line, and I said nothing. Michael mistook my silence for acceptance. He leaned forward, lowering his voice as if he were about to confess something deeply important. "Anyway, I came because I need your help. It's kind of urgent." My stomach tightened. Urgent? He had ignored urgency yesterday, but now, suddenly, he had urgent business with me? "What is it?" I asked flatly. He rubbed his hands together nervously. "So, Sarah and I found this new place. Big house, great neighborhood, perfect for the kids. But here's the thing. The bank needs proof of funds. You know how they are with mortgages these days. I just need you to transfer me part of Mom's savings account. Just for show, Dad. Just temporary. I'll pay it back. Promise." I blinked at him. The man had missed his mother's funeral. And less than 24 hours later, he was sitting in her chair, asking me for her money. Not condolences. Not regret. Not even a, "How are you holding up, Dad?" Just money. My voice trembled when I finally spoke. "Your mother was buried yesterday." Michael leaned back, sighing impatiently. "Dad, I know. And I feel bad about it, I do. But this is important too. I need to act fast before someone else buys the house." He said it like buying a house was equal to laying his mother to rest. Like the two could be weighed on the same scale. I clenched my fists. "You didn't come to her funeral," he shrugged. "It's not like she knew. She's gone, Dad. And Sarah's birthday." "Enough!" My voice cracked like a whip. His words stabbed deeper than he knew. For the first time since Margaret passed, anger replaced grief. Pure, burning anger. I stood slowly, towering over him. "You mean to tell me you skipped your mother's funeral to eat cake and drink champagne? And now you want me to hand over her savings? Do you even hear yourself?" Michael frowned, defensive. "Dad, don't be so dramatic. It was just one day. And I'm not asking for much, just a loan. You know I'll inherit half of everything anyway, right? So what's the difference?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and I realized something painful. My son didn't see me. He didn't see his mother. He only saw dollar signs. My wife's life reduced to, "What's my cut?" But instead of yelling, instead of throwing him out, I did something he never expected. I smiled. Just slightly, just enough to mask the storm brewing inside me. "You're right, son," I said calmly. "You will inherit something. Come back in a few days and I'll have everything ready for you." Relief washed over his face. He stood grinning. "Thanks, Dad. I knew I could count on you." He patted me on the shoulder, the same way you'd pat a colleague, not a grieving father. As he walked out the door, he said, "I'll bring the paperwork when I come back." "You're a lifesaver, Dad." The door clicked shut. I sat back down in Margaret's chair, hands trembling, chest pounding. But I wasn't trembling from grief anymore. I was trembling with purpose. Because Michael thought he was about to get everything he wanted. What he didn't know was that I already had a plan. One that would teach him a lesson his mother would have been proud of. And it was a plan he would never see coming. When Michael left that morning, humming to himself like he had just sealed the deal of a lifetime, I sat in silence for a long time. The house felt different. The grief was still there, yes, but now it had company. A new guest had entered. Clarity. Because at that moment I realized what had to be done. For decades, Margaret and I had worked to build a modest life. We weren't rich by any means, but we had the house, the savings, the retirement accounts. We had always said the money wasn't for us. It was for the family, for the children. But children, I was learning, are not created equal in loyalty. Grace had been there every single step of Margaret's illness. She drove Margaret to chemo, sat beside her in the hospital, and even moved in during the final months so I wouldn't collapse under the weight of caregiving. Michael? He sent text messages. The occasional, "How's Mom?" followed by excuses about work, the kids' soccer games, Sarah's schedule. And then, when the ultimate moment came, the last chance to show respect, to stand as a son, he chose cocktails and candles over his mother's coffin. That wasn't something I could ignore. So I picked up the phone and called Mr. Thompson, our family lawyer. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm, steady, the way only a man who has handled hundreds of family battles can sound. "Mr. Harris," he said gently, "I'm so sorry about Margaret. She was a wonderful woman." "She was," I whispered, throat tightening, "but I need to talk business. Urgently." "Of course. When would you like to come in?" "As soon as possible. Today, if you can." There was a pause. Then, "I'll clear my afternoon." Walking into Thompson's office that day, I felt a mix of guilt and resolve. Guilt because Margaret had always been the peacemaker, the one who believed Michael would eventually grow into a good man. Resolve because I knew, in my bones, that if she had seen what he did, she would never want him rewarded for it. Thompson adjusted his glasses as I explained everything. The funeral, the absence, the request for money. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "So you want to adjust the estate?" "Yes," I said firmly. "I want to make sure Grace is taken care of. She earned it. And I want to set something aside for the grandchildren, so they don't suffer because of their father's selfishness." But as for Michael, my voice trailed off. Thompson raised an eyebrow. "You want to cut him out completely?" I shook my head slowly. "Not completely. I want to leave him something. Just not what he expects." "What did you have in mind?" I smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile a man wears when he's happy. It was the smile of a man who has seen betrayal and decided to answer it with justice. "A letter," I said. Thompson tilted his head. "A letter?" "Yes. A letter in my handwriting, sealed in an envelope. He'll get it during the will reading. Nothing else. Just the letter. Let him open it in front of everyone." Thompson studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "That will certainly make an impression." We spent hours going over documents, adjusting accounts, drafting new terms. By the time I walked out of his office, the plan was set in stone. Grace would inherit the house, the savings, everything her mother and I had built. The grandchildren would have a secure trust fund, untouchable by Michael's hands. And Michael would inherit the truth. That night, Grace stopped by with dinner. She looked exhausted. Grief does that to a person. But she still smiled for my sake. "Dad, you didn't eat much today, did you?" she asked, setting a casserole on the counter. I chuckled faintly. "How do you always know?" "Because you're my father," she said simply. We sat at the table, picking at the food, silence heavy between us. Finally, she looked up. "Did he come by?" I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "You mean Michael?" "Yes." "Did he show up today?" I set the fork down and sighed. "He did." Her eyes narrowed. And I hesitated, then told her the truth. That he came, sat in her mother's chair, offered no apology, and instead asked for money. Grace slammed her fork down. "Unbelievable. After everything Mom did for him." Her eyes watered with frustration. "You can't give it to him. Dad, you just can't." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Don't worry, I won't. I already spoke to Mr. Thompson." Her brows knit together. "You changed the will, didn't you?" "Yes," I said simply. "I couldn't let him take what your mother and I built, not after this. But don't worry. The kids are covered. I won't punish them for his mistakes." Grace let out a breath of relief, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Mom would be so proud of you." I swallowed hard, my own eyes stinging. "I hope so. She always believed in second chances. But this was too much." We sat in silence again, the unspoken truth hanging between us. Michael had already written himself out of the family story. All I was doing was sealing the page. 2 days later, Michael called me. Dad, he said brightly, as if we hadn't just buried my wife, his mother. I'll swing by tomorrow with the paperwork for that transfer. Hope that's okay. Yes, son, I replied, voice calm, almost gentle. Come by. I'll have everything ready for you. And I meant it. I would have everything ready, just not in the way he thought. The day of the will reading arrived faster than I expected. I'd only just begun to process the fact that Margaret was gone, and now here I was, sitting in Mr. Thompson's oak-paneled office, waiting for my children to arrive. Grace was already there, sitting beside me, her hand resting gently on mine. She looked tired, drained, but her presence was steady, the kind of presence her mother had always given me. Then the door opened, and in strolled Michael. Late, of course. Sunglasses on, phone in his hand, looking more like he was walking into a business meeting than the reading of his mother's will. His wife, Sarah, trailed behind him, perfectly dressed, carrying a designer bag that probably cost more than my first car. They sat down across from me. Michael didn't look at me. Not really. He looked at Mr. Thompson, the lawyer. He was already leaning forward, eager, expectant. That told me everything I needed to know. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. His voice was calm, deliberate. Thank you all for being here today. We're here to read the last will and testament of Margaret Harris. Grace lowered her head, tears brimming. Michael shifted impatiently in his seat. As executor of the estate, I will proceed with the distribution of assets as outlined by Mrs. Harris and updated in accordance with Mr. Harris's instructions after her passing. Michael's eyes gleamed at the word assets. First, Thompson continued, the family home, including all contents, is to be transferred in full ownership to Grace Harris. Grace gasped softly. Her hand tightened around mine. She wasn't expecting it, but she deserved it. She'd lived in that house, cared for her mother in every room of it. Michael, on the other hand, leaned back, smirk tugging at his lips. Fine, he muttered. She can have the house. I'll take the cash. Thompson went on, unfazed. All retirement accounts, savings, and investment holdings are also to be transferred to Grace Harris. Grace covered her mouth, tears slipping free. Oh my God, she whispered. Michael's smirk vanished. His head snapped toward Thompson. What? All of it? Thompson nodded. Yes. Furthermore, a trust fund has been established for Michael's children to cover education and health expenses until they reach adulthood. This trust will be managed by Grace Harris. Michael's jaw tightened. Wait a second. You're telling me my kids get a trust, but I don't? Thompson's voice didn't waver. That is correct. Michael slammed his hand on the table. This is ridiculous. I'm her son, too. Where's my share? I sat in silence, watching him unravel. Thompson adjusted his glasses, then pulled out a small, sealed envelope. Mrs. Harris and Mr. Harris have designated that you, Michael, receive this. It was prepared specifically for you. Michael grabbed it with trembling hands. His face flushed with anger, but he ripped it open, eyes darting across the page. Then his lips moved as he read aloud. My dearest son, I forgive you, but I cannot reward a man who chose cocktails over his mother's final goodbye. Love is proven in presence, not in excuses. What you inherit instead is the lesson your mother prayed you'd learn, that family comes first. Always. The room fell silent. Grace was crying quietly. Sarah shifted uncomfortably, eyes wide. Michael's face turned crimson. He crumpled the letter in his fist. This is a joke, right? Dad, tell me this is a joke. I looked him in the eye, steady, calm. It's no joke, son. That's your mother's words. Words I stand by. He shot up from his chair. You can't do this to me. I'm your son. I'm entitled to half. That's the law. Thompson cleared his throat. Not when the will has been executed properly. And it has been. Michael pointed at Grace, fury in his eyes. You put him up to this, didn't you? You manipulated them. You always wanted to take everything for yourself. Grace stood, voice trembling but firm. No, Michael, I didn't take anything. I was there. Every single day, you weren't. Michael's fists clenched. This isn't over. I'll fight this in court. Thompson folded his hands. You're welcome to try, but given the documentation, I can assure you, it would be a waste of your time. Silence hung heavy. Michael's chest rose and fell with rapid breaths. He looked at me one last time, eyes burning with betrayal. You'll regret this, Dad. You'll regret cutting your own son out. I met his gaze, my voice low but steady. I didn't cut you out, Michael. You did that yourself. When you chose not to stand beside your mother, you walked away from this family. This letter isn't punishment. It's the truth. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he shoved his chair back violently, the legs screeching against the wood floor. He stormed out, Sarah scrambling after him. The door slammed so hard the walls rattled. The office went quiet again. Grace sat back down, still holding my hand. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she smiled faintly through them. She would have been proud of you, Dad. Mom always said Michael would only learn the hard way. I let out a long, shaky breath. My heart ached, but there was also a strange calm, because for the first time since the funeral, I felt Margaret's presence beside me. Not angry, not disappointed, just proud. And maybe, just maybe, Michael would one day understand, but not today. I've lived long enough to know that revenge doesn't always roar like thunder. Sometimes it whispers, quietly, patiently, until the right moment comes. The day after I exposed my son Michael's hypocrisy at the family gathering, the house felt different. Not empty, just still. The kind of silence you notice after a storm has ripped through town. Branches broken, puddles everywhere, and yet the air feels fresh. Grace was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in, a cup of coffee cradled in her hands. She looked up at me with those same gentle eyes her mother once had. For a second, I almost lost my composure. Dad, she said softly. You okay? I forced a smile. I should be asking you that. Grace shook her head, her long hair brushing against her cheek. No, Dad. You've carried this for too long. Last night, it needed to happen. Mom would have wanted you to finally stand up. Her words pierced me deeper than any sword. Because she was right. For years I had played the quiet parent, the one who endured, who kept the peace even when Michael's arrogance grew unbearable. I let him believe respect was optional, that family was secondary to his ambitions. And the cost of that silence? My wife, his mother, went to her grave without him at her side. That wound, it will never heal. I sat down across from Grace. My hands trembled slightly as I placed them on the table. Your mother gave her life to raising you both. She would have forgiven Michael. She always forgave too easily. But me, I can't. Not this time. Grace reached out and squeezed my hand. You don't have to, Dad. Some lessons, they only sink in when they come with consequences. 2 days passed before Michael reached out. Not a phone call, not a visit, just a message. Short, stiff, and painfully impersonal. Dad, I understand you're upset. I'll give you some time. Let's talk when things calm down. That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just his usual attempt to brush everything under the rug. Grace saw the message over my shoulder. He still doesn't get it, does he? I shook my head. No, sweetheart, he doesn't, and maybe he never will. And that's when it hit me. Sometimes children don't grow up the way you hoped. Sometimes they grow away. In the quiet evenings, I found myself wandering through the living room, pausing at the photo frames. My wife's smile stared back at me in every picture. Holidays, birthdays, little moments we thought would last forever. And there, beside her in so many of those photos, was Michael, a little boy once so full of wonder, gripping my hand, as if I was his whole world. What happened to that boy? Where did I lose him? Grace noticed me staring one evening. She placed a blanket over my shoulders and whispered, You didn't lose him, Dad. He lost himself. Her words echoed in my chest. Maybe she was right. Maybe I wasn't the failure I kept accusing myself of being. But the guilt never truly fades when you're a parent. If you've followed me this far, dear listener, then here's the truth I've come to accept. Family is not built on blood alone. It's built on presence, on sacrifice, on showing up when it matters most. Michael made his choice. He chose convenience, appearances, and selfish desires over his mother's final breath. And for that, I gave him my silence. Not because I hated him, not because I wanted to destroy him, but because silence, sometimes, is the loudest lesson. And Grace? She stayed. She reminded me that love can still survive in the ashes, that loyalty isn't extinct, that even if one child fails you, another might become the anchor you never expected. On the anniversary of my wife's passing, Grace and I visited her grave. I brought roses, her favorite. The breeze was gentle, the sun dipping low on the horizon. As I stood there, I whispered aloud, "I did what I thought was right, my love. I hope you understand." And in that moment, I swear I felt her warmth in the air, as though she approved. Grace slipped her arm through mine. "She'd be proud of you, Dad. Proud that you finally spoke your truth." I nodded, a lump tightening in my throat. So here I am, sharing this with all of you. Not to seek pity, not to stir anger, but to remind you of something I wish I'd realized sooner. Don't stay silent when your family disrespects you. Don't let years slip by, thinking time will fix everything. Speak your truth before it's too late, because one day, the silence will become unbearable. Tell me, if you were in my shoes, would you have forgiven Michael? Or would you have done exactly what I did? Let the silence speak for itself. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your voices. And if my story resonated with you, if it made you reflect on your own family, then do me a favor. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel. Because this isn't just my story. It's a lesson, a warning, and maybe even a mirror for some of you watching. Until next time, take care of your family and take care of yourself.